those with chocolate?
No. Okay.
Are we live?
Good luck, y'all.
No, you don't get it. Sorry. It's for us only. For us only. Alright, John, you good?
Good to go.
Current research practices surrounding climate change and indigenous peoples is centered around the dichotomy of resilience and vulnerability. Indigenous populations are either nobly resilient and threats are helplessly vulnerable in need of another failed governmental intervention. These homogenous narratives stem from settler research projects that cannot be disentangled from the process of colonization itself. Cameron 12. When periodically government neutral chains of pure teachers and chemical power through which indigenous relations remain to be as human to nature, climate change will become natural feelings with relations between climate change and to be as well as the color, politics, the county can be really examine assumptions and to consider rising in terms of practical knowledge, cause people, place, and shipping, completely colonization, selling, the practical processing, community, urban, and sanitary trust, indigenous speakers, terms knowledge, and here the long traditional production is indelly tied to colonization, colonial totally ways of taking vulnerability, adaptation, for reason, providing close assumption, knowledge, and practices, like running climate change, radical tech prevention, excluding particle, context, which is the early people struggle to respond to climate change, running local vulnerabilities, climate change, change, new intervention, as indigenous northerners, government intervention, and neutral, the problems between the information, British people, to coincidence, cancer, all that non-people who feel that all these people who think is on the colonial history, completely unfinished, just by the urging, the perceived urgency, the rationalized force places, the voice, naturally, action, climate change, but to take action and address the concerns that are really being identified by northerners. Indigenous peoples are neither simply passive victims nor virtuous warriors of climate change and land theft. Dispossession is not limited to the earth. It's an extension of extractive research that is taken without consent by scientists and academics who then wage extraction on indigenous bodies, land, and reproduction because native life is the ultimate threat to settler future. Simpson and Klein 13. There's no time when indigenous people are resisting on all these examples are going over historical country pressure, lands, or whole change, and languages. The hyper-attraction as resource, usually the attraction just mind, the mindset attraction, and assimilation go together, seeing the resource, culture, knowledge, resource, bodies, resource, children, resource, because the potential will help the attraction assimilation system, the colonial law, extract indigenous laws, women, and peoples, and the attractive mindset is about dialogue, bringing indigenous all the terms, indigenous people is about extracting whatever scientists and everyone wants to throw for good, and assimilating it. Settler states require this extractive relationship to territory and bodies to define themselves. Dispossession is born by living in dead native women who are rendered rapeable and extractable because they signify the possibility of native futures that are incommensurable with reconciliation. Simpson and 16. Conservative arguments require extractive relations, territory, constellation, try to move, extract land, kill land. All settler colonial regimes have a territory, reduce the element into a body, settler regime, and define the people, words, and settler change possibly, reproducing new life, other properties, other force, political, and one body, society, like these settler, highly able to be extracted from the city, these are really little, much degree, accumulate surplus, the dispossession, raise general balance, awareness of living, and the dead, disparate core values, native women, the bodies have been rendered most valuable because of the suburban land, production, indigenous kinship, governance, and culture, and patriarchal rules, and their lives are shorter, therefore, less education, and greater for frequently, and they have disappeared. The language should not be reconciliation because the historical bounds of colonialism is not over, it's ongoing, and sovereignty is not merely a call for land return or respect for treaty rights, but is a particular embodiment of refusal. Teresa Spence, a former chief of the Ottawa Piscot First Nation, announced that she would not eat until the Prime Minister of Canada met with her to discuss the conditions of people in the North. She declared her body as a site of sovereignty and refusal to find what she is required to do as an Indian woman, which is to die. Simpson and 16. Spence and now she was talking to Prime Minister, Governor General, with her discussing the poor condition, life in the community, and life the conditions in the North, and respect for her action and sovereignty. The indigenous people should stop eating solidarity, represents the appearance of flesh. Appearance was a sign of our commentators. Her access to flesh by slaughtered just because she required to do without starvation is to die, which legal casting out was casting possibly translating that's a children laws of indigenous governance as regular level bodies. The bodies are more than just flesh, they are being killed, and science and symbols being affecting political life, so they had to be killed. The technique elimination, legally, Indian actor, into and probably your husband, into women, mere doubt, the disparate white boys, the blood politics, the word, perpetual nature, governance, and evolution, legal femicide, not flesh, body, political order, as women, political formation, or fantasy, the instrument, and just own death, great fashion, subject white sovereignty, makes Teresa Spence a chief. She declared her body pieces of pronounced and needs sovereignty to decide of a decision after your action became accused of no more taking form of actions, flash, amendments, felt space, and world blockages, no more taking exception in fundamental aspects of issues that consent, the movement, of forces, the voice, one, the internal insurrection, treating like the end, like a dead body to be extracted from, and in a world of extraction and increased resistance, settler states use tools of recognition and reconciliation to assimilate indigenous nations through the promise of redemption. This necessitates a commitment to a mode of refusal that negates the authority of the settler colonial nation state and refuses the possibility of compromise with settler notions of sovereignty. Day 15. It's not a politics legitimizing indigenous nations state recognition rather one refusal. We recognize that's in trouble like settler nation state. I don't know more. The indigenous sovereignty movement can like indigenous lands of narrow resource political work there just direct action blockade CDP walking with resource work being trustworthy or international resource like looking dispossess the indigenous nation. The moves direct action you have a negative impact on economic infrastructure, political accumulation, capital, settler, political economies, attacks, part wrong, refusal that negates authority in other states. It's impossible for blocking movement struggle for free trade. The wars on a conflict is and struggle against the very purpose of settler colonial capitalism. And the 1AC is a refusal of reconciliation and dispossession of extractive research and settler narratives of indigenous resistance within climate change. Refusal is always particular and operates as a mode and framework for desire-based research in both academic and non-academic spaces instead of consuming white savior climate narratives which consolidate settler innocence. Refusal turns settlerism into an object of research which denaturalizes its totalizing Western structure. Tuck and Yang and 14 refusal prompts analysis back to woody bodies are trained for introduced refusal shift the case from the instruments. From the case about the body revitalizing instruments of refusal was to think about advantage analysis of short refusal, universe narratives, and writing and social lines of research that accumulate when circulating refusal. It's not a permission to reform rules of the case background, colonial metals, knowing protect person body, interventionally countered by the state dependent word being transferred in the minute or not production and by space pain, and documenting will racial defense of refusal, making me to hold crown and critique of settled colonies, whiteness, and reaching representation of refusal generates being champions, reputations, representing colonial knowledge, and never seek to settle close, and domesticate the final point where refusal connects to conversation factor to desires, count knowledge, settle colonial knowledge, all refusals, particular ground, historical analysis, present condition, researcher might make transparent the colonial academic knowledge and notifying left limits and expanding the sound knowledge being decolonial representational territories. Desire can be a motive of refusal. Desire refuses to master narrative. The colonization was inevitable to fully socialize to turn back self on a settler colonial knowledge and opposed to the universal evolution knowledge along its object research recently damaged humanities and need or intervention in nervous social lines remains unchallenged by any human telephone mirror to the object research features we bring to a halt the machinery that allows knowledge and facilitate interdictions and indigenous black life. They form a refusal by means of leverage resources of the academy containing representational territories from other communities and working to throw settler colonialism. Debate is a site of research. It is not insulated from the colonial academy that attempts to use the same techniques of recognition and assimilation with indigenous scholarship. Knowledge produced by native academics and debaters remains peripheral and homogenous, solely defined under settlerism's terms. Indigeneity is always in tension with academic research, but relegating indigenous scholars to either outside of the academy or to a particular form of presentation creates epistemic violence by wedding them to a singular idea of what indigeneity is. Refusal and debate and within the topic is something which continuously centers criticism on the structure of power, knowledge production, hunt, and 13, making ontological shifts and types of human knowledge with eligible and indigenous rights and having come to indigeneity with residential strategies used engaging with indigenous ontologies in rural community, university classroom conferences, sacred site ceremony as wall spaces that are simultaneous ceremony, education, and no choice, they cross borders, speaking ties, the voice of race and indigenous scholars, both fields possibly heard both at the same time, the navigation agents, and accurate rules of all the political tension, the water, efforts, indigenous research, and stopping where the libertarian recognition become heterotic possession, self-range, First Nation, become the foundation, the rights, and federally positive language, assimilation, nation, recognition, mainstreaming, dialectic, and requires that people to find a profiling asymmetrical forms, recognition, search, reinforce dominance, equality, power, the indigenous knowledge, killing, being shaken, celebration, how to be reconciling, inclusion, indigenous knowledge within dominant institutions, and despite what conference might lead to assuming the identity of academic papers, a time limited presentation, indigeneity, not an idea, it's also the practice and relational indigenous voices become lost in efforts to understand the indigeneity way to fix indigenous knowledge. Indigenous conferences have remained peripheral knowledge for doctrine and dominant institutions, discipline conferences are these of those about epistemic violence, and not simply that discourse dehumanization that produces the effects, or rather there's limited discourse that establishes the limits of human intelligence. Process colonialism knows America involve representational strategies that transform indigenous peoples and their lands, we conceptually materially facilitate their displacement rather than less than human idolatry, position, and central violence, suppression, indigenous people, vitality, sovereignty through spatialized strategies of future indigenous rights and political struggles depend on the ability of indigenous knowledge to reach its active and mobile relational nature and fixity given and colonial law. We told you can't go there when you want to track beyond opposed ideal boundary with stereotype as past tense people. This means that anthropology and academic production must refuse extractive scholarship that attempts to map universal assumptions onto indigenous resistance against dispossession. Spice and 16. Since the first colonial information for voluntary line, people have resisted the counterparts. People are resisting the same forces in the fight against Dakota access anthropology. You emerge in the U.S. from engagement with these lands. Defense with ethnology, built scientific validity, anthropology, social culturalization, cultural practice, indigenous people who were under attack by siblings, settler forces, indigenous people were portrayed as static cultures and virgin stations despite efforts to resist this erasure and assimilation. That is now indigenous communities are fighting for survival. Indigenous lives and cultural practice to remain ethnographic material to advance academic careers. And today, discipline has a renewed opportunity to honor their contributions to indigenous scholars and indigenous communities across the continent. Threatened by state support and extractive anthropology was not mirror this with extractive scholarship. The fight against sample about refusal to disappear as indigenous people right to say no to the pipeline, no to the poison, no to vacuous political theory, reconciliation, no to anthropological study, no to representations of nobles have the soul pervading environmental accounts of native activism. The ivory tower is built upon soul, indigenous animal, child slavery, LCD, Sakwanar, and engages them transfer, casting moment, nothing about was or is fleeting about Oka, Woodini, Alcatraz, Augustus, Lake, Elspetag, the Peace River Valley, Oka, Kaplan, and Lilo, Island, Mauna Kea, or West Grand Falls.
Okay. Yep.
Yep.
Okay. What do you think flesh is?
Flesh,
Yeah.
in the context of the way the Simpson evidence describes it, it sort of makes a distinction between bodies and flesh and how we understand it within
This
indigenous.
particular line that says bodies are more than flesh. Explain that to me.
Yeah, so Simpson's referring to in terms of how indigenous women are labeled within settler colonial nation states. So they are given privilege of having access to their body insofar as they are remain extractable and rapeable. So they're given access.
That privilege, they don't inherently have it.
No, indigenous women are only granted
So
that
all
bodily. Indigenous women are granted access to the body rather than just the flesh, only so they can be legally eliminated.
Are they inherently given privilege, or do they have it inherently?
Well, I guess you have to unpack what you mean by that. Our argument in the context of how indigenous women are relegated both just in settler colonial nations altogether.
Are they always given privilege, is what I'm saying.
Well, when we say privilege, we don't actually mean
Right.
privilege. They are given that privilege insofar as they are rapeable. So they're given
Okay.
access to bodily personhood only due to legal elimination through things like the Indian Act, etc.
Sure. What is femicide?
Huh? Sorry.
What's femicide?
The legal feminicide that Simpson is talking about is part of that patriarchal and patrilineal governance that has been established within Indigenous communities by white settler institutions. So it was a form of legal feminicide because it means that Indigenous women then, they were casted out in terms of how they were like understood because they were labeled property of their husbands.
That's cool. What does the F do?
Huh?
What does the F do?
We produce,
So
the
you
app
produce.
is, no, hold on. The app is a refusal of extractive research. It's a refusal of recognition. It's a refusal of
How do
reconciliation.
you refuse these things?
Well, the Tuck and Yang evidence, as well as the other forms, Simpson evidence, all indicate that refusal is something that is unique in particular because it is able to use sort of the resources that the Academy has against itself to stultify extractive research.
Are you a settler?
Me, yeah.
Okay. So I guess how does that work?
How does what work?
Like how do you reconcile that? With
What do you
the
mean by
app,
reconcile?
with
Like,
the app.
well, there is no form of like reconciliation. Our argument is a refusal of reconciliation. As a settler, I'm obviously embedded
Mhm.
within this whole thing, which is
So
why we
what is what's the mechanism that the app seeks to defend? Like
refusal.
So you just refuse it.
Yeah, refusal. Our
Why
evidence
why
is very
refusal good?
refusal.
In the
Many
instance
reasons.
where you're like can't reconcile my settler position, but
Well, in the
we need to
context-
refuse every instance in which
Well, sure, refusal.
indigeneity is placed in like this.
Well, sure, that's kind of the whole point of Tuck and Yang are making in the context of what refusal means. It's always particular. It's not just like this universal practice that can be applied evenly. In the context of my subject position, I'm not sure like what your question is trying to ask. I'm implicated within
I'm
within.
asking, what does the app do in the context of you not being able to reconcile your settler position, but also saying that we need to refuse every.
Well, yeah, it's a
in which
refusal-
Tropes of indigeneity or become violent. So my argument is like, how do you reconcile those?
Well, I'm not, okay. In terms of the middle part of your question, I'm not sure what you're getting at. But in the context of my subject position, the argument is that refusal is something that is unique because it turns the analysis in it flips the Academy's resources against itself, which are currently
Okay.
focusing on just violated Indigenous
that's
bodies onto structures, which
Why is
determine my subject
Why is
position.
dispossession gendered?
Huh?
Why
Oh,
is-
so the Simpson evidence is quite good in discussing how dispossession, in terms of how we understand the corporealities of Native women, are always raised and gendered by Native women because they signify the possibility to threaten settler futures because of red babies and the threat of reproduction.
Reproduction. Thanks. Yeah, I'll try.
What's your email?
Oh, I don't need to be on the email stream. Yeah.
What's your email?
I'll just, if you can send us a run debate at Gmail. Whole squad.
Every time someone asks, it's just like, oh, are you in debate? Okay.
Yeah, are you on debate? Just send it. Whole squad.
It should be sent.
Told man's virus free, so that's good. I guess.
Oh, it's because that doesn't work. You have to use that one.
Yeah, figured that.
I'm gonna charge it while you speak. That's what you choose.
Pizza's like, I'm done.
It's like debate.
Pizza's so tired. Give me just a second, it's still downloading.
Totally forgot about Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some issues with that too.
So sorry, Pizza, that your owner neglects you.
Alright, I'll talk to you later.
Have a debate, dude.
Oh yeah, I totally need that too.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm just really
Ruin this all. Good job, Andy. Proud of you.
Let it be known in the live stream. Anyone else needs to please enter mess.
Yeah. That we know.
Alright, good to see everybody. Have fun.
Bye, pizza. We will miss you.
Thanks, Andy.
You will be not as missed. Alright, we're good whenever you are.
Just give me one sheet. Everyone good to go?
Blackness is driven through psychic integrations that drive libido means of negrophobia, negrophilia, which are structured and claims to how individuals experience violence is Luterson and 14 ordinary white citizens, Asian citizens, Native Americans. One little example of how this conundrum and paradox affects the way we speak to white people and our so-called allies of color. The problem is in the libido economy, which is steady collective unconscious of everybody else. And if we are actually understand it better, we'd understand that blackness is already criminalized in the collective unconscious. Our problem is one of complete captivity from birth to death, and the origin, the starting point of our interaction with the state and ordinary white citizens. We can start to see the policing, the mutilation, aggressivity towards blackness as being a form of psychic health and well-being for the rest of the world, then we can reformulate the problem, begin to make a much more iconoclastic response to the idea for the quality of life. Every group lives in the context of violence, which is that what we call a sort of psychological grounding wiring, which means they can write a sentence about why they experience that violence. Native Americans are experiencing violence because an ongoing strategy of colonization. White feminists can say that it's an ongoing tactic within the strategy of patriarchy. This is an ongoing tactic strategy for human renewal. The violence against us becomes a tactic within a strategy to secure humanity. Humanity's place is not a tactic in an ongoing strategy to take our land away, to take our rights away. We never had any rights. Our psyche does not obey the objective laws of the structure. We exist in external super-violence and internal super-just self-hatred as one of its main components. The structure by which human beings are recognized by other human beings and incorporated into a community. Human beings is anti-slave, and slaviness is something that's consumed blackness and Africans, making it impossible to divide away from slavery from blackness. And the paradigm of colonization is not sufficient to encompass the genocidal modality of global anti-blackness. The aspirational humanity of indigeneity positions is as clientele civil society, while the grammar of sovereignty relegates blackness to the unthought. This is Woods and Seven. Shared experience in the social is not shared position in the structural. Black Africans and indigenous Americans do not perform the same usefulness in the structure of humanity. Through centuries-old trading in the Mediterranean, the Moors, and Spain and Portugal's predatory journeys down the coast of Africa in the 15th century that inaugurated the slave trade. Iberians have long been familiarized with blacks by the time they encountered indigenous people. Las Casas are who argue the Indians were the free subjects of the claim that indigenous people were not. The discourse on the humanity of the Indian is revealing, whereas the Indians gave the Spanish pause ethically, morally, ontologically. There was no pause in relation to Africans. A position of unthought. The slave waited on the sidelines. Their comrades have already been enslaved, killed, and profited to make possible conquest in the first place, posing no ethical dilemma. This black sidelining offers a condition of possibility for European ethics. Las Casas is seen as the father of human rights in the Americas. Ironic, given that Las Casas, an owner of slaves, Las Casas proposed the introduction of African slaves, sparing the Indians. He never crusaded against the mistreatment of the Africans as he did for the Indian. If you cannot be white, at least do not be black. The slave permits the emergence of the modern subject. The presence of the black means there are two grammars of suffering available at the Indian: sovereignty and genocide. Sovereignty is an acceptable category. Legibility for civil society. White supremacy can comprehend Indian subjectivity in terms of sovereignty. The treaty captures Indian communities and clientele status, and this is the very process that creates suturing gratuitous violence at the level of the slave. The slave never meets the level of conditionality for colonization, but colonization is always grafted onto the flesh of the slave. This is Sexton and 16. Colonization is not a necessary condition of enslavement, because slaves need not be colonial subjects and do not face the directive, you work for me. And slaves need not be seller colonial subjects, since they do not face the directive, you go away. The driving confounded position of blacks described them as exploiting colonizers, and the illusion of the permanent seizure of the body essential to enslavement, and the illusion of the body can be found in Rifkin, who seeks to displace race replaced by juxtaposing body with land and rights with sovereignty, thereby juxtaposing blacks as embodying with native as inhabiting without thinking diacritically about black inhabitation, and native embodying asserts disembodying deracialized native peoples, which is gain or maintain distance towards racial blackness. What can be done to a captive body? Anything. Genocide is endemic to enslavement insofar as slavery bans the reproduction of enslaved peoples as people. Native studies do not ask what slavery is in its histories, political structure, social, economic functions, psychosexual dynamics, and consequences. They do not want to know about it as best they evaluate it through their own loss and redress it is through their own political imagination. Slavery is a loss of language, lineage, land, or labor, but loss of any self that could experience such loss. Any politics based in recovery is bound to regard the slave as the position of the unthought. One should hear in the resonance between political theory, universal particular, and a psychoanalytic theory of the unconscious, and our demand for a politics of anti-ethicality decenters in what is stringent inverse of binaristic value in favor of radical disjunction against the world's grammar, ethics, voting negatives, picking up the gun to become the ultimate stick of artists against the liberal telos of humanism that situates sovereignty as a possibility. Wilderson intended. Black boy looks at white boy. Baldwin wrote about the terrible gap between the Norman Mailer's life and my own. When blackness inspires white emancipatory dreams, how it feels to realize the impossibility of inverse trying to convey the reality of Negro experience has to do with this man's relationship to his own life. He will face in your life only what he's willing to face in his. Baldwin puts his finger on the nature of the impasse which allows black to connectalize white to white thought without risking a white to black encounter. There's a difference, and I think he still imagines that he has something to save. I never had anything to lose. It's not a lack of goodwill to prevent the hyperbolic circulation of blackness. The key to this structural prohibition of human empathy can be located in the symbolic value of that something to save. An air simple vocational gesture towards a social world for blacks ignores the churning vertices of pervasive anti-blackness. Once we come to object humanity for its violent consumption of blackness, can black social life still listen human and socio-pathogenic logic representation, living death-making registers of perceptual labor in order to force and secure the grammar of progress. This is Wooders in 14. The web of institutional relations, which we call college debate, represents itself to itself as a bastion of consent and institutionalized world far removed from the daily injunction against the black past and present day guardians of college debate will have us believe the world of debate and the world in general can be reformed, transformed, thoughtful, well-meaning, liberal-minded people, engaged in reason, rational, above all, civil dialogue. A black person, even a free black person, might be in a worse situation than they were in 1854 simply for the fact that no black voice has any true value. Black enunciations cannot be recognized and incorporated into the global fabric. The narrative, arc of the slave, no pretense investment in emancipatory promise in democracy, no pretense investment in liberal notions of universal integrity, human, or the capacity to look into their hearts and change this kind of change to transform the promise belongs to white men and their junior partners, non-black immigrants, white and non-black people who are queer, non-black women. These citizens live through narrative arcs of transformation. When need be, their collective unconscious can call upon blacks as prophets. They can harness anti-black violence to turn black bodies, flesh into a necessary implements to bring about social transformation. The slave state looks a lot different from the political economy of debate, but the structural violence fortified and extended the political and libidinal economy of the plantation can be apprehended in the libidinal economy of debate. Debaters on the plantation, fully vested citizens, not so fully vested citizens live through narrative arcs and transformations of paradigm existence that if one is a slave, one has no contemporaries, no interlocutors in the world. The sciences are coupled with a series of unsuccessful attempts on part of the slaves to find an auditor for his or her speech and then be successful in the acts of writing. The simple act of communication of being heard by the other turns into an endeavor that cannot be reconciled with speaking implement the barriers that he makes ink with her too, then to secure his words on the page. Every declaration claims his status as a free black and bona fide member of civil society is met with reason rejoinders and counterclaims that proves him wrong, but met instead with the most horrendous acts of violence. Violence aimed not at producing a distant subject, rather is a violence aimed at maintaining the annihilation of his subjectivity. Violence and service to maintaining a line between living and dead, negrophilia and negrophobia, both of which are subtended by gratuitous violence, constitute elements of social death, natal disalienation, and general dishonor. The answer is to refuse the freedom of the one they see via their localization of sovereignty at the level of the body, because the vote has to be participatory in the fungibility of black aesthetics. The affirmative assumes that it can be liberatory, but in this sense, only another tool for whites to use blacks and leave them in their places. Wilderson and Tim reparations suggests a conceptually coherent loss of land, labor, power, etc. In other words, there has to be some form of articulation between the party that's lost and the party that's gained for reparations to make sense. No such articulation exists between black and the world. This is why I support the reparations movement, but my emphasis, my energies, my points of attention on the word movement. I support the movement because I know it's a movement towards the end of the world, a movement toward the catastrophe and epistemological coherence and institutional integrity. I support the movement aspect of it because I know that repairs impossible in any struggle that can act to stick up artists to the world, demanding all that it cannot give, which is everything is movement towards something so blindly new that it cannot be imagined. This is the only thing that will save us. Their political resistance presupposes a capacity and relationality for closer blackness failure to understand the differences in black and brown political agency, ensures the continuing exclusion of black body from politics. Fighting anti-blackness is not a matter of reinterpreting modernity. Sparishi in 12, if captured by capital does not obliterate the precarious agency, but the slave's capture defines a position that cannot negotiate the terms of its own incorporation, infused with compassion of black political agency through movements and struggles, position itself in a relation to black